I love all the hobbies and activities that we have here in the North Country that you just don't see in the cities. For example, you know you're in the North Country when Thursday date night is target practice at the archery range. We grab a bow and arrow and try to hit the mark on today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Clarkson University, offering over 95 programs of study with campuses in the Hudson Valley, Central, and Northern New York. More at clarkson.edu.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Friday, April 18th. First up, at least 12 immigrant workers were detained at a chick hatchery farm in Jefferson County yesterday. Amy Feiereisel reports.
State Assemblyman Scott Gray, who represents Watertown, says somewhere between 12 and 15 people were detained by federal immigration officials at CWT Farms Hatchery on Wednesday. The 50,000-square-foot chick hatchery is located in the Thousand Islands International Agriculture and Business Park. It opened last year, and it's the largest hatchery in the state. Gray says details, including which federal agency led the operation, are scant, and he doesn't know what prompted it.
There's something that prompts these situations, right? There is either criminal activity and or previous deportation, but in this case, we can't, ascertain any of those details.
Gray says on top of the detained employees, another dozen workers didn't show up for work on Thursday, presumably out of fear of being detained. That leaves just 10 people on staff to care for thousands and thousands of chicks. Gray says he hopes some of the detained workers are able to return and that the hatchery can find temporary workers.
Hopefully restaff as quickly as possible and stay in operation. It's a concern. We have to make sure that these operations, these businesses continue to remain viable through this.
WWNY-TV reports that the hatchery had been using a staffing agency to recruit workers before, but that didn't meet demand, and it began hiring migrant workers. It says the hatchery has reached out to Jefferson County officials for help recruiting workers, because with less than a third of its workforce, it has roughly 48 hours before chicks will begin to die. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio.
Fish and game clubs are a big part of North Country culture. People go to them for target practice, for skeet shooting events. Many clubs host dinners and other social gatherings throughout the year. Every Thursday, the Saranac Lake Fish and Game Club offers free archery lessons. Emily Russell stopped by to watch and try out the sport for herself.
There is something really elegant and elemental about archery. The long line of the arrow, the curve of the bow. Humans have been shooting with a bow and arrow for tens of thousands of years. Charlie Marshall is getting in some target practice at the Saranac Lake Fish and Game Club. On the outside, it looks like an old log cabin. Marshall is practicing in a long banquet hall with big wooden beams that frame the ceiling.
But I'm going to come back and try to figure out where I should let go.
Marshall is 74 years old. He's wearing a beige bucket hat. I ask him what he thinks about when he's practicing.
What's going through my mind is I realize I used to be better at it.
To me, he looks like a pro. The movement is so natural. You can tell he's been doing this for decades. And he's been passing on his skills for the last 6 years. Every Thursday afternoon, Marshall is here at the Saranac Lake Fish and Game Club, giving free archery lessons to anyone who's interested. He shows me a pile of aluminum arrows.
Most all of these arrows I build myself from components, and it saves me some money, and it also gives me spares. When I damage one, I've always got a couple extras of the same type.
Marshall loves sharing his skills with everyone from kids to adults. Archery is one of his passions. His eyes start to water when he talks about the sport and what makes it so special.
And that one thing about archery that I like is it's not expensive. It doesn't take a lot of skill unless you're looking to be an Olympic archer. And you run into a lot of people that are good folks, and it's just a really good group of people.
Most Thursdays, anywhere from 5 to 15 people show up for lessons. Earlier today, Marshall was teaching a few young girls. Now he's working with Dave and Dana Kellerman, a couple from Lake Placid.
We know Charlie from our competitive shooting program that we have here. And while Charlie was still running the program, we figured we needed to jump in and learn everything we could from him.
One blow of the whistle around Marshall's neck means the Kellermans can get their bows and arrows up. Twice means they're clear to shoot. They both sink their arrows into the targets at the far end of the room. Neither of them hit the yellow bullseye, but they're pretty close. I asked Dave Kellerman what the key to success is.
Well, the closer you go, the easier it is.
Just stand really close to the bullseye.
No, it's somewhat technique driven. Once Charlie gets you started and you get some fundamentals of technique, it's just repetition, practice.
Marshall has been practicing archery for nearly all his life. He grew up south of Ithaca near the Pennsylvania border. As a kid, he was into all kinds of shooting sports.
Whether it be a rifle, shotgun, archery, or, I had an uncle that used to take me groundhog hunting, and that was a skill that required a lot of patience and long-range shooting with a rifle.
Marshall went through a phase as a kid when he was making his own ammo. But it was really archery that stuck for him and his two brothers. When he was a teenager, Marshall even won a statewide competition.
I didn't think it was a big deal because, the family had been shooting archery for quite a few years at that point. And we were all pretty good, but never expected to be, good enough to win in our class.
All right, so it's time for me to take a lesson from the master. This is not the first time I've shot a bow and arrow, but it's been a while. Marshall walks me through the setup.
So the arrow, pick it up like this and come over the top.
I rest the tip of the arrow just above my left hand that's stretched straight out, holding onto the bow.
Okay, so at that point, you can start putting pressure on the string.
My right hand tries to pull the string back, but my arm is starting to tremble.
All right.
Oh, it's so hard.
All right.
It's hard. And I work out.
Well, it's relatively. Yeah. We can get a little closer if you want.
I do want. So we take a few steps towards the target.
Really good. Now pull the arrow back. Keep going. A little more. And now let it go.
Oh. I completely missed the target, which is just 30 feet in front of me.
Grab another one.
Okay.
Now, let me show you a trick.
I shoot a few more arrows, finally hitting the target. But now my arm is exhausted. Dana Kellerman says it does get easier the more your body learns how to move with the bow and arrow.
From a technique perspective, I'm using less energy now that I have better technique. Yeah. I was really fighting with the bow originally and probably exhausting myself prematurely. But now that I have more of an idea of how I should hold the bow and just my overall stance, I can shoot longer.
She and her husband Dave grab another bucket of arrows for one final round. This is their third week trying out archery. They both look a lot more comfortable than I felt. After a few rounds, Dave pulls back on his bow and lets another arrow fly. Wow, bullseye!
My goodness, I should stop there.
Dave decides to end today's archery lesson on a high note. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio at the Saranac Lake Fish and Game Club.
Well, so we are humbled and energized by the outpouring of support this week during our spring fundraiser. Get this, we raised over $450,000. Money that we will need and more as our federal funding is under threat. What you told us over this last week is that local journalism matters to you, that it's one of the pillars that sustains our communities, and that it's worth paying for. We will use that money so responsibly to fight for the facts, seek the truth, and highlight authentic voices in the North Country. And if you didn't have time to get your donation in, there is still time. Go to ncpr.org/give. Thank you all so much for your generosity. Music today by Eddie Lawrence of Saranac Lake and Evan Veenstra of Gananoque, Ontario. Have a great weekend. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.